Hello and welcome to the Lean Girl Fitcast, your place for motivation and mindset mastery on your fitness and fat loss journey. We are heading into episode 4 today, unpacking why the weekends are such a struggle. We are brilliant during the week. Perhaps maybe not even brilliant, but come the weekend and everything falls apart. We fall off that horse time and time again, and somehow, even though we have great intentions, we cannot stay on track. So in this episode, we are going to give you a practical mental tool that on that Friday night, when your go-to is to have the extra cheesy Debonairs pizza, you are going to have an incredible, powerful tool that you can use to actually start changing those behaviors. You can build back that integrity with yourself and you can start taking action toward your goals. So let's get into the episode. I am here with my husband, Giiirl. He is an expert mentalist. He has presented in over 40 countries and he specializes in helping people, specifically high performers, to reach peak performance while maintaining happiness. Huh?
Yeah. Deep happiness.
Deep happiness. So we often think when we want to be successful, that means pain, it means struggle, it means stress. And Giiirl has combined the two to say, hey, you don't have to experience that. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be stressed. In fact, you'll be more successful if you are able to do it from a place of peace and happiness. So Giiirl is going to be bringing all of his psychology and mindfulness tools into the mix today, and we are going to be applying it to this fat loss challenge. So let's get straight into it because we have a lot to share today. And I think I would say 80 to 90% of the women that have been in my programs that I've chatted to over the years, friends, family, have been able to resonate with this. Something happens to us when the Friday vibes kick in and suddenly it's like the fuck it flip switch just flips. And it can be really frustrating, right? When you feel like you're actually putting in effort, you're staying on track, you've had this great plan all week, or as I said, maybe you even haven't been great, but now you're like, okay, well, I haven't been great anyway. I'm also going to say screw it. So I thought what would be cool is to start off with maybe some personal shares, because Giiirl and I, even though we do have some mental tools, we can also fall prey to that. That's something that we've both worked on. It's something that we don't do often, but again, we're human. So I think that this will also allow you to have a bit of self-compassion that we're all human and it can happen. But
it actually happens more often than we would like to admit.
Yes.
So, although I would like to think that, there's me and then just mere mortals, it happens all the time. We're human and we're teaching from experience here. So,
yes.
Totally.
So, babe, I would love for you to share your chocolate scenario. Giiirl had been traveling for a couple of weeks and he got home, and your girl does love to keep a bit of chocolate in the house. Actually, you brought some back from Israel actually as well. So we did have a good stash of chocolate in the cupboard. And well, you take it away. You let them know. How did this go down?
Yeah, so Ange asked me to share a personal story of a time where I lost a little bit of control. And this was just the most recent one, not to say it's the only one. I got back from a leadership program in Israel the food in Israel is just unbelievable. So I got back after having not eaten that well for 8 days while being on my trip. When I say not eaten well, I just wasn't counting calories and, I was indulging in a lot of hummus. And when I got back, I just found myself eating a lot of chocolate. And I would look at a chocolate and think, oh, I'm just going to have it. And so this was my journey, is that I didn't even want to engage in going through any kind of process to stop me eating the chocolate. And at the time, I was just on autopilot. And it was only when Angie then asked me to think of a story, I said to her, well, there was this time where I was just eating a ton of chocolate because I had not eaten well the week before. And so I was thinking to myself, well, I'm so far away from what I should be doing. Having this one piece of chocolate won't really make a difference. And I was feeling overwhelmed and a little bit anxious about where I was and where I needed to be to get back on track, or so I thought in my mind. And so that caused a lot of that uneasiness inside of me and uncertainty. And so I was just reaching for the chocolate each and every time.
Eating your feelings.
I was eating my feelings.
And ironically, when we eat our feelings, we feel worse and the cycle continues. Similarly to when I was on some crazy restrictive diets, you can have the same end result on a Friday, but mine was due to restricting so much that came Friday, I was like, wow, I have done so well. And you know what? I'm tired. Like, I actually want to have something delicious. I haven't had any yummy food the whole week. I've killed it in the gym. I am just going to let myself off the hook here. And of course, when you've been restricting as well, once you do start eating something really delicious, it seems like you have no breaks and you're just completely out of control. And then that turns into, I'll start being restrictive again on Monday. And I may as well just write this weekend off. I'm so far gone, what the hell? Let's just give it horns, because come Monday, I'm going to be so good. And yeah, we know how the cycle goes.
Yeah.
So the question that we want to tackle here today is, how do we actually break this cycle? When it is something we've been doing for weeks, months, maybe decades, how in that moment when all you want to do is eat that pizza, let's paint the picture. It's a Friday night. You get home from a long week, whether you felt like you had a really tough, stressful, challenging week, or perhaps you were really restrictive, which of course we know the science of the fact that you don't need to restrict that much. So there could be many reasons why we're feeling this way, but we're looking for a little something to make us feel good.
Yeah, or you're out and everybody's just ordering pizzas,
Yes.
Or the family says, oh, we're just going to get Uber Eats or Mr.
Yes.
D or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, fine, I'll just have it as well. And so it's these two scenarios: either having an overeating week, or being so restrictive that by the end of it you just kind of give in to the temptation. So I guess the question is, how do we change that behavior? And every single time we talk about behavior, we need to understand that there is a root cause to our behaviors. And I created this carrot analogy, which I think paints the picture quite well. You can imagine that a carrot is planted in the ground, and the thing that we actually eat that we call carrot is actually a root, because it's a root vegetable. And so above the surface are the leaves. And that, in terms of this analogy, represents our behaviors, our reactions, and our behaviors. And that's above the surface, which means it's visible. And so we see our behaviors, we tend to judge our behaviors, we see other people's behaviors and tend to judge that as well. And it's the first thing that we want to change, not only in others, but also in ourselves. So that's why a lot of people say, I keep doing this. How do I change it? And then you can tell other people, oh, this is the behavior you should do. How many times have you told someone that they should do something different, but that actually doesn't change?
Yes.
Or it does once and then goes back to normal.
Yes.
And how many times do we tell ourselves, oh, I'm going to do this differently?
Yes.
And then we don't,
Yes.
right? So the reason is because we're not actually changing that behavior from the root. And so the root cause of that behavior, I'll give a simplified version here, is there's an emotion that's driving our behavior. That emotion is often under the surface. And the reason why we feel a particular emotion is because we're seeing the situation in a certain way. Sometimes it's because we're seeing ourselves in a certain way, or we're just seeing the situation in general. But we're in a situation, we see it in a certain way, which causes us to feel a certain way, and it's that feeling that drives our behavior. If we don't change the way we're seeing things and the way we feel about things, we will keep repeating that behavior.
I think that's such a key differentiator, because I resonate with looking to change the behavior. I'm doing this, I want to do this, but it almost feels automatic. the behavior feels automatic, and there must be something which that makes sense, that it's the thoughts and the emotions, and once we can shift that, that will then help us to overcome and move out of that. So thinking about this carriage analogy, what if we look at our Friday night example? Explain what perhaps those, okay, we know what the behavior is. The behavior is that we're reaching for something, even though we know it's not aligned to our goals, even though we know it's not going to make us feel good, and we're still doing it. So what could potentially be the underlying thoughts and emotions underlying that are driving that behavior?
Well, if I think back to my eating the chocolate, in my mind, when I go back, I know this sounds so paradoxical, so ironic.
Yes.
In that moment, I was feeling so uneasy, so uncertain about my eating journey because I had eaten so poorly. And so I was feeling, call it overwhelmed, uneasy. I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling just crap about myself, like disappointed in myself that I had done that, which is BS as well, by the way. Sometimes we've got to give ourselves a bit of a break, but that's a different discussion. But when I came back, I was then feeling like the gap between where I was and where I thought I needed to be on track was quite big. And so with those emotions, I wanted relief from those emotions. I wanted for a moment to just forget that I had all of those. And so in episode 1 of this podcast, we spoke about how we have this innate, this inside of us, this inherent nature of peace and fulfillment and happiness, but we obscure it, we cover it up when we're either seeking something or resisting something, trying to avoid something. And so for me in that moment, having those emotions was causing me to want to behave in a certain way that's going to bring an end to my seeking or my resisting. And
uneasiness.
That uneasiness. So ironically, eating that chocolate, in that moment that I ate the chocolate, I was no longer, it brought my seeking to an end momentarily. And in that moment that I wasn't seeking anything anymore, I felt much better.
Yes.
And then my brain attributes that to having eaten the chocolate. So now I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, I ate another piece of chocolate. Now, 10 minutes later, I'm no longer happy again. So automatically I start thinking, well, let me just have another piece of chocolate because it's going to give me that moment of relief.
Right.
So because I haven't dealt with the emotions and because I'm not seeing things clearly, including the fact that I think that eating that chocolate is going to make me happier, right? I'm not seeing things clearly there. I'm just perpetuating the behavior.
Right. So if we do want to have a look at that thinking that's leading us to that behavior, then I guess the next sensical question would be, how do we manage that emotion or those thoughts in that moment? Because if we can change that, then I guess that would be the route to changing the behavior. And I think something important that I wanted to mention here as well is just talking to the restriction. When you look at this at what I teach in my programs as well, there are practical things that you can that can help you to not feel, I guess, so uneasy at the end of a week. So I often say perhaps head up to maintenance on the weekend so you feel like you have more calories to play with, or perhaps instead of reaching for the Debonairs pizza, make something that's a fake away, or of course, not restricting your calories so much during the week, staying at a great calorie level. So that's also, I think, important to mention. There are practical ways as well, but perhaps you do get to the end of the week and you are still having this sort of uneasy feeling. It could even be from a stressful work week, right?
Yeah, you could have had just a stressful day. You could have had a fight with someone. Maybe it's at the office, maybe it's at home. And all of a sudden we think to ourselves, like, I'm not feeling great. Sometimes we don't think it. This is just a feeling.
Yes.
And we think that, but when I eat this, or, I'm going to have this takeaway meal and then I'll feel better. And so we start putting our happiness in external things because we've been conditioned all our lives that when I eat that, I feel happy. But the truth is that it's in the eating that distracts us, clears the clouds momentarily from inside of us that are obscuring, or that turbulence inside of us that's obscuring our inherent natural state of happiness and peace. And then we attribute it wrongly to that external thing. We don't need those external things. It's a huge mistake. It's actually a delusion that we've all grown up with, conditioned to think that it's those external things, food or otherwise. Maybe it's other goals in life or anything else, relationships, activities, substances, goes on. And we think that our happiness lies in those things. But food is probably one of the most common things that we put our happiness in.
And it's so accessible and it just comes so naturally. And because, unlike alcohol, we have to eat, to survive. So it's not like something you can just cut out completely if you're trying to change a habit. So in preparation for this podcast, we have really tried to nail down some self-inquiries, some questions that you can ask yourself in that moment. So going back to that Friday night when you've had a stressful week, when you're feeling this uneasiness, so that you can stop in the moment and we can help you to create that new behavior by first changing your thinking. So over to you to share our really, I think, powerful 3 questions that I want you to get out the notes in your phone right now. And I want you to jot them down, because this is something that it's not just a once-off, it's a practice, right? It's
exactly
consistently re-asking ourselves these questions when we find ourselves in that moment.
Yeah, the best thing is, is to self-coach in those moments. And coaching is all about helping somebody to discover the right answers that you already have in you. And so, as you're listening to this, I want you to know that you already have the answers in you to help you in these situations. The questions that I'm about to share, that Ange and I sat and prepared and packaged into, we affectionately are calling it the 3-question intervention. And so write this down so that in that moment where you're feeling like you want to get that fast food, or it'd be so easy just to eat that chocolate, do yourself a favor, just pull out these notes, ask yourself these 3 questions, and it will absolutely change the way you feel, the way you see things, the way you feel, and therefore your behavior. So the first question, would you like to take the honors?
Question number 1 is, am I looking for this food, whatever it may be, could insert food here, to make me happy right now?
I wish that I'd asked myself that when I was reaching for the chocolate. If at the time I just looked at the chocolate and said to myself, am I expecting this piece of chocolate to make me happy? It would have been obvious to me at the time. Yes, absolutely. It would have also made me have to recognize that I was feeling unhappy or uneasy or whatever, however it was, frustrated at the time.
I can feel that, I must tell you. When if I imagine myself in the situation, it suddenly makes you consider that, right? And then when you're like, damn, I am.
Which brings us to question number 2, which is asking myself, if I knew that eating this chocolate was not going to make me happy, would I still eat it? Or another way to ask it is, if I knew that eating this chocolate would make me unhappy, would I still eat it? Because how many times have you eaten the thing and then afterwards felt even unhappier? So it made you more
worse
unhappy,
off.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
we're worse off than we were, people.
Yeah. So I prefer the second version, which is, if I knew. So now this is constructed very specifically, because what we're doing, if you think of the carrot analogy, is that we are replacing an assumption with a different assumption, a more empowering one. Because the assumption that I had at the time that I was eating that chocolate was, when I eat this, it'll make me feel better. So now by saying, if I knew, then we're saying as if it's already true. It's already happening. If I knew that eating this chocolate would make me unhappy, would I still eat it? And so by replacing it almost like it is a truth, I'm immediately adopting that point of view. It's going to make me feel differently, because then I'm thinking, hell no. I'm not going to eat that thing if it's going to make me unhappy.
No, hell no.
Which brings us to the third question, which is...
And question number 3 is, if I felt complete, fulfilled, and
happy
right now in this moment, what would I do? What would I do next? And I think without having anything prescribed of what you would do next, if you honestly feel that, the next move you will make will be one from a place of self-love. It will be aligned with who you want to be, with what goals you have. And perhaps that still means indulging in a Lean Girl fakeaway or having a couple slices of the pizza, but not taking it to the point where you have that regret, where you have done something to the point of you're seeking something from it, right?
Exactly. We do have, I order stuff takeaways sometimes. I will still have chocolates, but every time I have it, if I know that I'm not putting my happiness in it, I'm not having it for the wrong reasons. I'm not having it coming from a place of lack. I know that I'm having it because it's an expression of me living life and loving life right now. I already feel complete. I feel happy. I feel self-love. And so I'm going to eat it every once in a while and in moderation, and it's going to be part of my calorie budget, and it's not out of desperation. It's not out of feeling needy, like I need to feel okay inside.
Yes.
And I'm placing it in that thing.
Yes.
So let's recap the 3 questions, right?
Yeah.
If you are in a situation and you're about to make a bad decision, ask yourself these 3 questions. Question number 1 is, am I looking for this food to make me happy? Number 2 is, if I knew that eating this would make me unhappy, would I still eat it? And question number 3 is, if I already felt happy and peaceful inside, if I already felt complete, then what would I do? And there's so many different options that one can do. You can have something in moderation. I know that you've got on the Kitchen Coach, you've got all of these different restaurant menu guides.
I've got restaurant
So you can
guides.
still eat from a restaurant if you don't want to cook. You got all of those things. So there's so many other options, but it's that emotional compulsion that tempts us into these places where we're seeking happiness that just destroys our ability to behave in a way that's congruent and that makes use of all these resources.
Absolutely. And that's why I've created tools like the Kitchen Coach to show you that you can have something that tastes good and makes you feel good and is aligned with your goals. You don't have to choose between one or the other. But I think the key here is, as we, are summarizing this episode, is to consistently challenge where we are placing our happiness, and whether that is in the goal, whether that's in a number on the scale, which is what we covered in episode 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't seen those episodes, we would recommend to check those out. But I think that this is such an important shift to make. And once we start inquiring with ourselves, once we start asking ourselves these often challenging questions, we actually can get to the root. So I really hope that this was meaningful for you. I hope that you have written down the 3 questions, and the upcoming Friday night, maybe it's Saturday, maybe it's Sunday, whichever day that you really feel like you are struggling, I hope that you open up your phone, you ask yourself these questions, and together we can start making these shifts that I know are going to make you not only have better results, but also find more joy on this journey of building your leanest body ever. So last but not least, actually 2 things. Firstly, if you enjoyed this episode, we have just started this podcast and we are so passionate about it, and it is such a meaningful project for us. So please go ahead and share it with anyone that you think would find this valuable. I think any woman who wants to build a lean body, which is all of us, would find value in this. So please go ahead and share it with the people that you love. And then the next episode I want you to look out for is how to stay motivated and inspired even when you feel like your progress is slow. I know we've all been there, so I'm really looking forward to that one. And thank you so much, babe. I think what you shared here was really meaningful, really powerful. And where can people find more about the important work that you do?
It's always a pleasure helping your community and sharing this important body of work, because I think that in any area of our lives, we can reach our goals much faster, actually, perform at a higher level, and enjoy the journey when we know how. if this resonates with you, you can go to happypeakperformance.com, and I share this kind of work, but in the context of peak performance at work and in other areas of our lives. So you can check my check my programs there.
Giiirl's doing some amazing work there, so definitely go and check it out. Thank you so much again for tuning in. We will see you back here next week. Don't forget to share, leave a review, and let's find a little bit more joy on the journey to building our best bodies ever.